All right, so we're gonna talk about graphics cards again. Things you can't buy, I know, but they're still fun to play with, so we're gonna talk about it anyway. Not this one though. We've already done a review of this one. If you wanna check out the GeForce RTX 3080 iGame, which one is this? Advanced, there it is. Then check out the link down below. Maybe we'll put a link right here on the screen. We already did a review of this. But what today's topic is gonna kind of be more about is air-cooled graphics cards versus water-cooled graphics cards, particularly cards that are using AIOs, because they sent us their latest iGame RTX 3080 Neptune, interesting name, Neptune, which is essentially the same GPU and such with a water cooler on it. So we're gonna see what kind of gains we pick up. We're gonna talk about some of the build construction, while also kind of at the same time doing a little bit of a review of this graphics card. The all-new 5000D mid-tower airflow case from Corsair features an optimized front panel for maximum ventilation, while the integrated cable management and tempered glass side panel means you can show off more of your components and not your cable mess. To see the full list of specs and to learn more about the 5000D's flexible fan mounting options perfect for both air cooling and water cooling enthusiasts, follow the sponsored link in the description below. All right, so we'll kind of start off with a little bit of an unboxing type review here of the Neptune. There's a couple things that already concern me with the image here. We'll take a look at the way that this is built. But so it's kind of common now for, why do they put felt on one side when it's just cheap foam on the other? Anyway, oh, that's a 240 thick boy. All right, so, oh, another one of our screwdrivers. That's where we got that one that we got. I like these screwdrivers. Anyway, where was I? I was talking about things. RGB cable, water-cooled GPU. Wow, it's weighty. And that's pretty much all that's in the box there besides the, radiator screws and the bits for the screwdriver. Everything else is empty. It's kind of common now for companies to basically take these Asetek type AIO coolers. I don't know if this one is specifically Asetek, but that's what companies have been doing, is taking these Asetek CPU coolers, making adapter plates to mount them to their GPUs, building shrouds for them, because they've learned that with NVIDIA's GPU Boost technology, which is the auto overclocking features based on temperatures, power draw, and current boost tables in terms of how far they're allowed to go on frequency, they've learned that if you can keep the die cooler, you get more performance out of it. So here is what the card looks like. It's all very floppy. It's kind of it is metal. Is it? No, that's plastic. It's kind of a gunmetal color. 3 8-pin power connectors, which is just like the iGame Advanced. And then the backplate, not a fan of the big blue Neptune on there. It's also kind of a machined, so it's gonna leave skin and behind when you rub it. The only reason I even point that out is because that means dust is gonna be getting stuck to this as well. And then if you wanna plug in the RGB for it, not a total fan of this either. It looks like this plug right here connects to the back of the card. They can get it in there. Story of my life. Wait a minute, is this this is a different plug type. So Phil took the old
push harder method?
I try not to shove things in holes too hard, okay? I don't want to break things. Moving on. So in terms of the radiator, it does look like your very typical square aluminum. I do find these fans kind of fascinating though. So they've got this channel along the side of the blade. So that means any air that's scooped in can't splash off the side. It has to go through. And then it's a single fan. Why don't more companies do this? Why don't they make 240s and 360s like this? You just put them in your case and then one wire. I think more people should do that. Before we install it, I'm gonna talk about something here that's a little bit of a concern to me. So here's the pump right here. I took the plastic off already. You can see fingerprints really do attract to this. I'm not a fan of the design. I guess it does have a very like Tony Stark kind of a look, but my concern with this is we're giving direct cooling to the GPU die. However, there's no fan here to move air across the VRMs, the power delivery, the chokes, MOSFETs, and memory on the PCB. There's other items on the PCB that create a lot of heat that need to be cooled. In fact, I'm gonna show you my Kingpin card here, which you guys have seen a million times, because even though when we apply LN2 directly to the GPU die and it does freeze like the memory stuff around it, the VRM on the front and especially the VRMs on the back, even though they're being like chilled because the cold does move through the board, can get so hot it causes crashing even when the GPU die is at like minus 150 degrees Celsius. In fact, this is my 2080 Ti Kingpin and you can see that it's very dusty. Oops. But one of the things that they've done is they have the block under here, but they also have this fan and the heat sinks on here on the power delivery, just like I showed you, blowing air through the card to air cool the components that still need some cooling, but not anything as extreme as water. You can see, it looks like on the picture right here, without taking it apart, you just have these long extension tubes that meet up with the pump. And it looks like the cold plate does have a heat pipe that's designed to take heat from the memory and move it into there. But you can see right here, the power delivery is pretty much completely just left to its own devices. And the problem with that is with this cover over it, like this, my fear is that we're gonna be trapping the heat in there, but we're gonna see whether or not it makes a difference in terms of the clock speeds. I wish more companies had something similar to like how the ICX works, where you can actually see the temperatures of the VRM and stuff on the EVGA ICX cards, but they have a patent on that, so I guess, yeah. Let's go and install it. How does this install? There we go.
You're supposed to put the pump higher than the rad.
That is not, that is like the most teetery thing. Ah. All right, so we got the card installed. It's got this very arc reactor looking thing there. It's not plugged into the ARGB cable because I only have one header on this motherboard and that's plugged into the fans. We had to do some sleuthing on my old video to find out what our old scores were because of the fact that we only ran it in Port Royal. But what we care about is how this card is comparing to the old card with the same settings and such, at least out of the box testing and see how far it'll overclock. The iGame Advanced air-cooled card, we were able to get to a 2085 with a plus 150 offset on the core and plus 750 on the memory, which is kind of standard. The G6X likes to overclock, it really does. You can go too far though and start to get errors. It is error correcting, and then when it's correcting errors, you get a major drop in FPS. But it was about 56 degrees under load. That is with the button clicked in. That's gonna give us higher power limits essentially is what that's doing, and higher boost tables. So this is what the preliminary results look like. It's 22C at idle. That's because that fan, the fans on the radiator are running and the pump is going. So a lot of times what happens with the air-cooled cards too, and again, this is more of an air-cooled versus AIO and some of the trade-offs, a lot of the air-cooled cards have a 0 RPM mode or a 0 dB mode because they're designed to, when they're not under load, let the idle temp creep up as high as 50C, which is perfectly fine for the GPU, honestly, and then have the fans not turning, which does a couple of things. One, makes no noise, and two, it doesn't add any dust into your GPU that's not necessary, adding to some of the clogging of the fins and such as it's turning fans for no reason to keep the idle temps down. Remember, these GPUs are designed to run over 95C before they shut off. We already did a video on there, like where does it actually shut off? Where we took a cooler literally off the card and ran it. So 22C at idle is actually pretty good. So to keep things as apples to apples as possible as our last test, we are on the same test bench and same driver and everything. We're gonna run Heaven, extreme tessellation, anti-aliasing at 8x, 1440p looping until the GPU cooler has reached equilibrium, which takes longer with water than it does with air, to see where, one, our clock and our temperatures max out. First things first though, 1995 is where it started and it dropped down to 1980. I think 1995 is gonna be, one, that was a great year. That was my sophomore year of high school. No, it really was though. But when it comes to the boost bins, I don't think they'll go higher than 1995 or maybe 2010. Because remember, they're 15 megahertz increments. All right, so it looks like we topped out at about 46, 47. It's going back and forth between that 1 degree depending on the load of the particular scene. It dropped down to 1965 megahertz, and that's gonna be directly related between, well, there's 1950, depending on what the boost table and temperature intersect is. There's two different lines there. As the temp goes up, the frequency goes down, and there's the intersect that does that, right? As you move the charts around, and that's where it ended up. Now let's talk about the power limit for a second. This is something a lot of people misunderstand. One, your graphics card is not limited by your power supply. People seem to think power limit indicates the amount of power available to it through the power supply. That's not the case. That's the amount of power it's allowed to draw. I've seen some people say, but why does this card go to 8 and this card goes to 15? This is clearly a better card. That's not the case because it's gonna be based on a scale of 100%, and 100% on one card might be lower than another card. 320 is the spec. A lot of these custom cards, especially water-cooled cards, will have something like 350 be the new base, or 340 or 345 with an extra 15 watts. That's 100, and then you're adding 8% of that. So 8% of 320 watts is less than 8% of 340 watts. That's how the math works. We also just hit 48C right there. But that's fine. I have gone ahead and just maxed out our power limit and at 108, and you can see nothing changed on our core frequency, and that's because, again, The temperature is what's truly controlling right now how far we are able to allow the frequency to go. And I think it's going to crash at 245. Oh, no. So 2205, it crashed. I mean, I can't be upset about that. So we're just going to leave it at 200. So it looks like right around 2175 is where it crashes. We've raised about 3 degrees up to 52, which is why we dropped down to 2145 now, but we're at plus 1100 on the memory. 12566 is what we had with the iGame card. So we are what, about almost 400 and math? See what our temps got up to. During that test, our temps maxed out at 47, and it was still climbing, so it probably would have still hit the 50s. GPU usage was exactly at 100, and then our core clock was bouncing between 2175 and 2145. Not bad. You can see right there that our temperatures were a little lower than the air-cooled card, and our clocks were a little bit higher, which made up for the nearly 400 points of difference here. Now let's go ahead and change out those fans and see if we can't get that 12,939 to maybe hit 13,000, which will make this our fastest 3080 that we have. So I just took the fans off. It's kind of interesting to me that I ended up feeling like they're terrible fans because they're made by Cooler Master. I'm not saying Cooler Master makes terrible fans. I'm just a little bit more surprised that they weren't better. All right, so I went ahead and pulled out all the stops, and I pulled out my Corsair Ml 120 fans. These are maglev, high RPM fans. You can even hear it. The other fans you couldn't hear at all. So I just want to see now what our improvement is going to be by just letting this radiator get as much cooling as possible. So just like before, running our heaven test until it's completely saturated. And I bet you we'll actually see a couple of boost spins. It might even stay around that 1980 mark and not drop down to the 1950s. So let's see. All right, so our previous test had hit like 47, 48, and I think it actually had hit 49 by the end of it. We're capping out at 42, and then it drops back down to 41, sometimes even 40. And that's just because these are the same settings, same high RPM or max RPM, and I don't even know if I mentioned it in the previous take. I did go into the BIOS and set these fans to 100%. Because the downside of having an AIO hooked up to your GPU that does not listen to the GPU on when it needs it to speed up is the fact that if it's listening to the CPU because it's plugged into the motherboard, it's just going to chill at a low RPM if your CPU is not hot, while your GPU needs it to ramp up to make the most effect of the radiator. As you can see right here, 7 to 8 C difference by just putting higher RPM, better static pressure fans on there. I want to see 2200 on this card. That's what I want to see. There it is, 2205, still running. That's actually pretty, okay. Did we pass 13,000? Yes, maybe, please. Okay, so we seem to be like hard limited right around that number, that 12,900 something. So the reason why we're not seeing a huge score increase is although we've got the temperatures improved, we're still dealing with some of those power limits. That's just as good as it can do, I guess, which is not bad. That's higher than the air-cooled card, obviously. It's just whether or not this particular model is going to suffer from the fact that it has no active cooling at all for any of the PCB items and the VRMs and the power delivery, which is very important when you're pushing overclocks and such. You can see that there is performance to be gained with AIOs hooked up to graphics cards. NZXT even made that bracket. I don't know if they exist for 30 series yet, but you could take an NZXT AIO and adapt it to your graphics card, and it even had a fan that would mount to it because, like I said, you need to active cool that stuff. Can get you a significant improvement in terms of clock speed and performance in many of your games and stuff if temperatures are the reason why your card isn't boosting any farther. What's got to be more or less dependent on you is whether or not the additional cost is worth it. More often than not, AIO graphics cards are going to be $100+ US more on average because of the fact that they're paying for that AIO. If they got 240s, you can take what it's going to cost for a CPU cooled AIO or an AIO cooled CPU cooler, which is usually 240s, and take that price and know it's going to be that much plus a few more percent points just because of the fact that it's a water-cooled graphics card. So what do you guys think? Comment down below if you think water-cooled graphics cards with AIOs are worth it. Full cover water blocks inside of custom water loops, that's a completely different discussion. There's a huge diminishing returns to a open loop versus an AIO. That's about quality of parts. That's about the passion of doing water cooling. That's not even part of this discussion. We are talking about AIO specifically. I can tell you right now, the iGame Neptune, this particular GPU has definitely been hitting 2200 or just below it on doing nothing but adding an AIO to this shows that we've clearly reached an era of architecture where 2000 seemed like something we would not be able to hit just a few years ago without exotic cooling. Now we're at 2200 on water, just basic AIO. So sound off in the comments below what you guys think. What is your go-to cooler type and why? Thanks for watching, guys, and as always, we will see you in the next one. Oh, and speaking of GPUs and stuff, don't forget, we are giving one away, so learn about it right here. Hey you, before you click off this video, you may or may not be aware, I'm actually doing a worldwide graphics card giveaway where one winner will get to choose either a 6800 XT Merc 319 card from XFX or a 2080 Ti MSI Gaming X Trio from Team NVIDIA. So if you're sitting there right now going, I didn't know about this, how do I enter? Follow the description down below. You guys will find a link to the giveaway video that will give you all the details. Don't wait, because it really sucks to find out about these after they're over. This graphics card.